name is David Benkof, and I love show tunes. I see a lot of Broadway shows, some plays, but mostly musicals. We're going to look at some music. We're going to talk a little bit about the current season. We're going to sing, and we're going to talk about Broadway and the Jews. We're going to listen to music, and you'll tell me what is Jewish. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am. What's Jewish about the music? Who knows who Debbie Friedman is? Debbie Friedman? She's the most important musician, composer of liturgical music of Reform liturgical music. She tells a story about Carole King, that she was lonely and she felt a yearning for connection, and she just thought about her religion, and she cried out, Shema Yisrael.
You just call my name.
Shema Yisrael. You just call out my name. So this song, the kernel of this song is Shema Yisrael, because I wanted to use it as an example of how there are some things on Broadway that are very, very Jewish that you wouldn't know unless you look really hard. I know that thing about the Shema because I heard it directly from Debbie Friedman. I searched it on Google just to see if it's well known. It's not. I couldn't find it on Google. So some things you have to know someone who knows someone, and guess what? You do. Let's talk about Come From Away, and I'm going to warn you, I may get emotional because this is an amazing story. Does anybody know about what happened in Newfoundland right after 9/11? Mm-hmm. You've heard of it?
Where?
Okay, most people haven't. I'll tell the story. Newfoundland and Canada. Right after 9/11, for the first time in American history, the airspace over the United States was closed. Because we didn't know. There are already 4 planes we had identified. 2 crashed into the Twin Towers. 1 crashed into the Pentagon, and 1 that we think was headed for the Capitol building. We don't know for sure. But we know for sure crashed in Pennsylvania because the passengers heroically brought it down because they had heard what had happened to the Twin Towers. So, but nobody knew how many others there were. Is something going to go crash into skyscrapers in Los Angeles and Chicago or the White House? Nobody knew. So they closed the airspace and they kicked all the airplanes out of America. And they had to go to Canada. But they couldn't go to Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, because then what does that accomplish? If there are terrorists, they could crash into those highly densely populated cities too, so they had to go to smaller areas. And the largest number went to Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is maybe the 8th or 9th largest city in Canada, I'm guessing. I love Canada, but I don't know all those facts. But the second largest went to a town in pretty far north in Canada called Gander, which is in Newfoundland, and it has a huge airport. Why does a tiny town in northern Newfoundland, Canada, have a large airport? Does anybody want to guess?
Chicago?
No?
It has to do with the flying over the...
Yes! Yes! Well, transatlantic.
Remember, I'm a Canadian.
Okay, oh, you are. Welcome. Then you'll like this story. They have to stop to refuel. Back before we had more advanced planes, they had to stop somewhere. And because it's north, it was on the route, so that was the place in like the 50s that planes stopped. They didn't tear it down, why would they? So they still had all this room for planes to land. So they diverted the traffic to Gander. Gander was a sort of lovely Canadian town. Newfoundland is sort of a different history than much of Canada because it was still a colony of England, like 80, 100 years into Canada's history. And only like after World War II did it vote, and only barely did it vote to become Canadian. So it's got its own little history. It's very different, Newfoundland is. Town of about 10,000 people. They call them Newfies, kind of derisively. They call them Newfies. They're a little different.
It's the equivalent of the pull-off joke.
Yeah, they're Newfie jokes, right? But they're pretty. They probably have they're good natured towards it, right? And also, it's the only place in, I think in the world, certainly in North America, where the time zone is off by a half an hour, right? In every other time zone it's off by, right. It's a different place. Okay, but good people, good Canadian folk, 10,000 people in this town. I think 39 planes stop in Gander with almost 7,000 people who are stuck there for, it ends up being 5 days. And so the town pretty much doubles and has all, nobody warned them, has all the resources that it had. And Gander sprang into action. And in this musical you see it, and if you read about it you'll learn more. So for example, the local SPCA, the person who works with stray animals, she took care of all the animals. With that many planes you're gonna have, there was an ape on one of the planes. There were lots of dogs and cats. It was her job to take care of them, right? The bus drivers were on strike, right? And so the bus drivers and the city made a pact. While the planes are here, we'll work for the city. And they drove everybody around. And as soon as the planes left, the strike came back. A lot of socialists up in Canada. Anyway, so it's just this wonderful story about, what it's about is it's about human kindness and generosity. And the reason it matters, and as an American, is it's at the time, probably the worst time in American history, and it's this generosity, and the closest thing I can think of is Schindler's List and other stories during the Holocaust, of just people just warmly opening their hearts in a time of crisis. Now you might say, come on, that's the Holocaust, right? The Nazis wanted to kill the Jews, and they took risks and they brought them there. But think about this. What if Gander had refused to help? And that's not so ridiculous. What if they had said, we don't know if you're terrorists. We don't want to risk it. We're not going to take you in. What would have happened? It would have been awful. And everybody there wasn't just American. They were from all over the world, and you see that in the musical. It would have been hugely tragic if Gander hadn't been agreed to help, but they did more than agree to help. They were extraordinarily generous, kind, welcoming people into their home. All the civic organizations, the schools and whatever, started baking, and if someone was sick, they would go see the doctor, he would treat them, he would give them medicines, they'd try to give them money, and they'd say, no money! Gander refused to take any money for what it did, and on the planes leaving, they took up a collection, and certainly afterwards, and they started a scholarship fund for the children of Gander to send them to college. So the people who this happened to, and then later other people too, said thank you that way. It's just a wonderful, wonderful story, and they created this wonderful musical. So there's a song in the middle of it, and you'll be able to see what it's about if you listen to it. But there's sort of a moment where Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and remember, to be Muslim at this time is very tricky, because nobody knew. They were wondering, who's on this plane here? And that you see some of that discrimination and some of that hesitation, but also some warmth in that direction. Anyway, so where they all express their prayers. So we're going to listen to the way this works, and once you hear it, if you want to sing along the first part, it's a very, very moving, prayerful benediction. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring you love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. And where there's doubt, true faith in you. Of your peace. Where there's despair, let me be whole. Where there is darkness, only light. Now you can join in. Say shalom imrama. Uya say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru. Now listen to this.
man here in town. He's lived here nearly his entire life. He heard that there was a rabbi converted here, and he came to find me and tell me his story.
I was born in Poland, I think, and my parents, they were Jews. They sent me here before the war started. I still remember some of the prayers they taught me. As a boy, I was told I should never tell anyone I was Jewish, even my wife. But after what happened on Tuesday, so many stories gone, just like that. I need to tell someone.
Wow, right? And this happened. This is true. And in the show, by the way, there are maybe 12 actors, and they play a lot of different roles. But one of the characters, plays a rabbi, and there was actually a rabbi in. Again, this whole thing really happened because there's a lot of everybody. Because there's 7,000 people, right? Of course, there's one rabbi because there's a little bit of everything, So just hearing this, and then later the Muslim sings a little bit, and then they come back to the song. But it just, for me, it's sort of it's a time where a lot of people needed to pray. And so in the show, they take a moment and they do that. So we're gonna listen one more time, and you can sing if you want. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring you love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. And where there's doubt, true faith in. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, only light. And where there's madness, ever say Shalom Gimromam. Uya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Amen. Okay, what's Jewish, other than this, what's Jewish about Come From Away? First of all, Irene Benkof and David Hein, the correctors, they wrote the creators, they wrote the lyrics and they wrote the music, are not just Jews, they're Canadian Jews, right? The best kind. Okay, I love Canada. They are. Their last musical, which I saw, liked, didn't love, was called My Mother's Lesbian Jewish Wiccan Wedding. Yeah, Oy vey, exactly. And it's got a little bit of everything. They ran it in St. Louis, and they did outreach to the Jewish community. It's called the New Jewish Theater. They did outreach to invite lesbians and gays to come. I asked them if they're doing outreach to the Wiccan community, and they haven't thought of that. Anyway, so one interesting thing about this show is that it ran in Toronto, DC and Toronto before it came to New York. But this is great. The night that Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, came to see the show, he went with Ivanka Trump and Nikki Haley, who is the ambassador to the UN, and they watched the show. Why is that really, really important? What's the show about?
It's about the Canadians helping out the...
It's about refugees.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a show about refugees. It's about taking in people in need, and that's on the agenda. It's something that Ivanka Trump and Nikki Haley are talking about, considering, arguing, and it was very nice that that they got to see this show and thinking about, what if we were refugees? How would we feel if we were taken in and welcomed? The rabbi, his name was Rabbi Levi Sudak. He was a Chabadnik. He was Chabad of Edgware, near London. And he was heading to the Ohel, which is where the Lubavitcher Rebbe is buried. So, because he wanted to pray there before Rosh Hashanah. Indeed, he heard, he was approached, because there was this man who had been who'd been in Newfoundland since he was a child. A little weird that northern Newfoundland is where you would have a Holocaust refugee. It took me a while to understand why, and then I realized because of the history of Newfoundland, at this time, at the time that the Holocaust was happening, right? He was like, this was the time of the Kindertransport, right? They were getting people out, right? And they went to England. Okay, England. So for that is not weird for a person from Poland facing the Holocaust to go to England. Happened all the time. And it wasn't weird for people from England to go to Newfoundland. It was an English colony. That happened all the time. So 1, 2, 3. So when I first heard it, I was like, what does a Holocaust survivor do? Well, that makes sense. Okay.
If I may.
No, please.
So in brackets, but Newfoundland, that whole, the maritime provinces was also where they had concentration camp for Germans who were put in prison as prisoners of war in Canada. And there were a number of yeshiva boys who were put into concentration camps in Newfoundland from Germany, and it was rabbis in Toronto, Rabbi Price, who went to Ottawa and said, what is going on here? They are not enemies. And he got them out, and those students went on to become the rabbis.
Oh, wonderful
Canada.
Story. In Canada, that's a wonderful story, because of course they're not enemies. In the play, the rabbi is more modern. He wears a knit yarmulke, but there's this moment where in the show where the survivor had been given a yarmulke by this rabbi, and they sang together, and the rabbi is getting up to leave, and the survivor gives him the yarmulke back, and the rabbi gives it back to him. In the play, they notice that the rabbi isn't eating. So they kosher a kitchen for him in Newfoundland. They kosher a kitchen for him. And then here's a true story. He actually made a Shabbat, because there were other Jews on these planes, right? He made a Shabbat for about 24 guests, one of whom was a Tibetan monk of Jewish descent. Right? They looked in this town. This is kind of like Hanukkah. They looked in this town, and they found one bottle of Manish. Isn't this only Hanukkah? Right? Found one bottle. Okay, his rescheduled flight going back to London.
8 days, eh?
No. But his flight going back to London was on Shabbat. So he would have to be, if he skipped that flight, which he has to because of Shabbat, then he'd have to be in Gander for Rosh Hashanah. And, that would be not so good, right? So, residents of Gander drove him 500 miles to the nearest airport that had regularly scheduled planes, and he took a flight actually to New York from there, and was able to be with his family in New York in time for Rosh Hashanah. And just days before Come From Away opened, Chabad of Newfoundland opened its doors. First Chabad. This is just, I love this story. But it's not the best thing on Broadway right now. At least this season, we have to leave Hamilton aside. That's another conversation. The best thing on Broadway right now is a show called Dear Evan Hansen. It's extraordinary. If Hamilton didn't exist, it would be the best musical of the 21st century. It's not fair that it comes 1 year after the best musical ever, and I'm not kidding. It would have gotten more attention, right? But it's got to get a lot of attention. It's a slight musical in terms of cast, in terms of its ambitions are high, but someday it's going to be done in every high school in America. It's set in a high school. It's going to be like everybody's favorite high school musical for drama clubs. Here's what happens, and I'm going to give away plot points because not so many of you are going to go to Broadway anytime soon, and so I'm going to tell you some things that we call, I'm going to say, spoiler alert, and so you can leave if you think you're going to see it in the next month or two, but I assume none of you are.
November. We're going to November.
Oh, really? So you're going to see the show?
Well,
You're not going to be able to get it.
Remote.
Or that's sold out. But if anybody's watching on YouTube, you might not want to listen to this part. You might want to fast forward because I'm giving away some spoilers. Okay, Evan Hansen has some confidence problems. He's seeing a therapist. He's taking some medication, and his therapist says, "You need to believe in yourself. And I'm giving you an assignment," and his mother helps reinforce this assignment. "I'm giving you an assignment. Every day, you have to write yourself a letter. Dear Evan Hansen." Tell yourself. So he writes a letter. "Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be a good day. You're a good person. I believe in you. People like you. You're important, etc., etc." And, he prints it out. He actually doesn't have it at home. He has to print it out because he has to show it to his therapist. So he uses the computer lab at school. And sort of a kind of goth, kind of loser boy named Connor. And Kevin has a cat that we later learn why, or I'll tell you why. He fell out of a tree. Anyway, a loser boy, they have a little argument. The Connor gets a little angry, but there's still this tension. And finally, Connor, Evan, nobody had signed his cast. And Connor said, "I'll sign your cast." And he goes over with it, and he writes in huge letter, CONOR, in sort of like an aggressive way. And then he sees Evan is holding a letter. And he looks at it, and he says, "Are you making fun of me? What is this letter? What are you doing to me?" And he puts it in his pocket and runs away and commits suicide. So, then his parents find out, of course they find out that he's killed himself. They see this letter in his pocket. "Dear Evan Hansen." And they think he wrote it to Evan Hansen. Why not? "Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be a great day. You're a good person." And they thought their son had no friends. And now they're like, wow, he had friends. So they tell the principal, and they call Evan in to the office because her parents say, well, he was our son's only friend, and we should let him know that Connor is dead. So Evan comes in, and they look at him, and the first thing they notice is his cast. Connor! So they are immediately sure that it's true, that they had this relationship that they kept secret. And Evan Hansen doesn't know what to do. He's this sort of shy-ish, careful please. He's this sort of, thank you. He's sort of this sort of shy-ish young man, all right, who is in over his head because the parents need to believe that their son had some meaning, that he had some friends. He was into drugs and all these things. And now it sounds like he had a meaningful, special relationship with another human being. And Evan goes along with it. He hides, the fact. He hides the fact that they barely knew each other. But Evan is in love with Connor's sister, and even mentions her in the letter. He's very embarrassed by that. So, to fast forward, essentially, Evan starts to get more involved in this lie, right, and makes it more elaborate. And then technology gets involved. And the scenery has all kinds of screens and Facebooks and YouTubes, and you see how somebody starts a Connor project to remember Connor. And this one character, she makes herself the co-president of the Connor project, and she forces Evan to be the other co-president. And she says something like, well, we weren't friends, but we were good acquaintances, right? Everybody wants to have a connection to Connor because he's the one that's being celebrated. And who's being celebrated the most? Evan Hansen. first scene, he becomes like popular and more confident. And he like gives a speech that's on YouTube. His mother figures it out. Second act, he's like getting more involved with Connor's family and the parents. His father is out of his life. And now Connor's dad is like bringing him in as a connection. He even says, here's the glove, the baseball glove I bought for my son. He never used it. I want you to have it. Evan's family is poor. Connor's family is wealthy. And they decide, we want to give you the money that we set aside. We know you don't have the money to go to college. We want to give it to you. But Evan's mother is rather proud and rejects it. And it's all very, there's a lot of like, interplay between wealthy and not wealthy, popular and not popular. And there's two other things that I have to tell you about this show. One is the music is great, and you're going to hear probably the best song. Certainly it's going to be the most popular. This is going to be sung, like I said, in high schools, but also as audition songs for the next 50 years or more. Music is just great. It's written by Pasek and Paul. Remember that name. You're going to hear more of it because they're going to be among the most successful, popular songwriting pairs of this century. You probably saw La La Land. Okay, they wrote the lyrics. They wrote the lyrics. And you see obviously what they can do. And here they wrote the music too. They had done other shows that are quite good. One is called Dogfight, but they didn't make it to Broadway. This is their first Broadway show. This is going to be their first Tony. Not yet, but it's going to happen. All right? So that's great, but there's one other thing that makes this show extraordinary. And that's Ben Platt's performance as Evan Hansen. You heard it here first. I've been saying this since I first saw it. Not off Broadway, but it was in DC before Broadway. I've been saying this, which is it is a once in a generation performance that he gives. He is the front runner for the Tony for Best Actor. A year ago, nobody heard of him, and this performance, because Evan is a complex character, and he changes through the course of the show. And you see that happen in this guy. And he's got these sort of nervous tics, but they're not kind of like exaggerated or like, and it's even more so than maybe Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, which is very well done. You believe me, you don't see an actor, you see a character. And you feel for him and you understand what he's going through, but his face and his singing, hopefully you'll be able to see him on the Tonys. They always put it on iTunes if it's not available here. You'll see his performance. And live, it's just amazing. This is just in terms of acting and singing and singing. It hasn't been topped in a long time, and I don't think it will be. That's the best part about a show that has a lot of very good things. So we're gonna listen to and sing along with a show called Waving Through a Window. And it's early in this show, and he's talking about what his life is not being on the inside, right? He's on the outside looking in. He hasn't been accepted yet. He doesn't have a role yet. So let's look at some of the lyrics. So let's go to, I'm going to teach you in advance 2 pieces, so then when we listen to it, you can join in when you hear those parts. So the first, listen to me and then sing with me. Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. Everyone. Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. Second line. Step out of the sun because you've learned with me. Step out of the sun because you've learned. And from the beginning, the whole paragraph. Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. Step out of the sun because you've learned. So you see, there are 2 places where we'll sing that. So you'll be able to, we'll go back and forth between hearing Ben Platt, and you'll join in with him. And there's one other point down here with the underlines. That line comes in 4 times. So it goes like this. When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Happens 4 times. Sing with me. When you're falling in the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Again, when you're falling in the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? 2 times. 2 more times. When you're falling in the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? We're going to come back and talk about falling in a forest. Because remember, he broke his arm. It's a story about, what's the one word, what's the musical about? Suicide. Okay? So let's listen to Ben Platt give the performance of a lifetime.
I've learned to slam on the brake before I even turn the key, before I make the mistake, before I lead with the worst of me. Give them no reason to stare, no slipping up if you slip away. So I got nothing to share, no, I got nothing to say.
Join in. Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. Step out of the sun because you've learned, because you've learned.
On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I've always been? 'Cause I'm tapping on the glass, waving through window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear. I'm watching people pass. I'm waving through window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? We start with stars in our eyes. We start believing that we won, but every sun doesn't rise, and no one tells you where you went wrong.
Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. Step out of the sun because you've learned, because you've learned.
On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I've always been? 'Cause I'm tapping on the glass, waving through the window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear. Well, I'm watching people pass, waving through the window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving?
When you're falling in the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Okay. You just answered my first assignment. I want one adjective. Just throw out an adjective. Sad. Song. How do you react to the song? About how it makes you feel. Or what you think about the song. Emotional. Touching. He's desperate. Excellent. He's alone. He's yearning. I want two more. Come on. Outsider. Good.
Kind of hope, no?
Hope. Where's the hope?
And like if he's, like the verbs are kind of hoping that something will happen. And
He's
then
waiting, right?
And the melody is like not that sad as the text it is. Like,
Is he looking through a window?
I think he's waving.
He's waving through a window, right? I'll give you in a second. So he's trying to he's reaching out, but nobody's reacting. He's waving through a window. Yes?
I think he's helpless.
Yeah, he feels helpless. Okay, so that's what that is. That's how he feels, and that's how the character is. And you gotta see this guy at the end of the show. When he gets to on the outside, always looking in. Will I? He's like spitting his sweat, and and you see it, you believe it. It's an extraordinary performance. You can see it on YouTube, but it's not the same. It's just not the same as seeing it in person. And like I said, November you won't be able to get a ticket. I think maybe a year from now, probably will slow down, but maybe not, because once it wins the Tony, and probably a Tony for the best musical and a Tony for him, and who knows how long he'll be. A lot of times they extend their contracts, they play a long time. Sometimes they move on. I've seen him sing other things, so he certainly will have. This is not like a one note. It's not like his personality is Evan Hansen, so therefore he would never be appropriate for any other musical. He can do a lot of things. I've seen him play on YouTube play Jean Valjean, for example, from Les Miserables. Okay, a little bit. So here's an interesting piece of this musical. Pasek and Paul thought about the famous, sort of proverb that works for him. Because the question is, does anybody pay attention to this guy? He's on the outside, always looking in. So they said, what's the thing about falling a forest? What's the regular saying? If a tree falls in the forest
and no one's there,
does it
make a sound.
doesn't make a sound, right? That's the regular version, and pretty much everybody knows or has kind of heard of that. They twisted it, okay? If when you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? So he made it about him. Do people hear me? I am falling in a forest, he sings. There's nobody around. Pasek and Paul wrote this, and then one of them said, wait, what if he fell in the forest? And they worked it in. They wrote this first, and then they worked in a suicide attempt by Evan Hansen into the show. And that's where the cast come from. They were already it was kind of about that. But they stuck this in, and the show, you learn late in the show that he was in a tree, and he fell out, and what happened, but we kind of know. It's just, his humor is just, there's this moment where they say that he fell out of the forest and nobody came. Well, and that's what was funny about it. Well, it wasn't funny, it was pathetic, but he is funny. He has some jokes, but kind of seeing where his humor is from. Great show. Okay, what's Jewish about Dear Evan Hansen? A lot. First of all, Benji Pasek and who wrote the lyrics and music along with Justin Paul. Benj Pasek is Jewish. Justin Paul is not. There's that. Stephen Levinson, who wrote the book, which means all the stuff in between the songs. He wrote that. I thought the characters were Jewish, and I have a very good case that they are, because Evan's cousin talks about Jewish summer camp and the Israeli soldier that he made out with, female Israeli soldier, and that kind of thing. So, some of us have cousins that aren't the same religion. I saw an interview with Ben Platt who said, "I'm very Jewish. My family's very Jewish, but not the character. I'm not sure." Michael Greif, the director, also Jewish. Anybody recognize that name? Michael Greif. He directed Rent and Next to Normal. He's very well thought of. And Ben Platt is really, really Jewish. His family is rather active in the Jewish community, and they've been doing acting for a long time. When Ben was at summer camp at Camp Ramah, every year at Camp Ramah they do a play, they do a musical, and all their plays and musicals are in Hebrew. So he played Sky Masterson in Guys and Dolls, and a few places on YouTube he gets interviewed, and he said, "Oh, I did a musical in Hebrew, what did you sing?" And he said, "Well, I was Sky Masterson," and they'll say, "Oh, how do you say let me a lady in Hebrew?" And then he'll sing, "Hey, Neely, lady mazal. Hey, Neely, lady mazal." You hear him singing this major star who's about to be the best actor in musicals, he sings in Hebrew, so it's really fun. His father, Mark Platt, is a producer. You may have heard of many, but most recently one of the films he produced is called La La Land. And he also produces shows on Broadway. You probably haven't heard of this one. It's called Wicked. Have you ever heard of Wicked?
Yeah.
Right? So he's an extremely successful Broadway producer. And in my opinion, Tori Spelling didn't get to be on 90210 from her talent. It's because her dad, Aaron Spelling, major creator of that show and many others, and she is hers. That's right. I believe within a year, Ben Platt will be more famous and important than his dad. Right? This one is, of course, doors open when your dad is Mark Platt, but at a certain point, it takes off, and it's totally merit. This guy is amazing. Okay. Also, I have to bring up. I don't know about Stacy Mindich, who is the main producer of the show. Looked around, couldn't tell if she's Jewish. Mindich, I'm not sure. But one of the producers who helped guide it at Second Stage Theater, which was the off-Broadway show that it was at, is Carol Rothman. She's definitely Jewish, I know for sure, because she's my cousin. Whether Evan is Jewish or not, I think this play speaks to the American Jewish experience. I think that on some level, the Hansens represent Judaism and Jewishness in America, in that they're on the outside looking in. They really want to be part, and they're waving. And certainly earlier in American Jewish history, certainly at a time like the 30s, that wasn't so easy. And Evan Hansen actually gets semi-adopted by Connor's parents, and there are two key symbols that to me means his yearning, as a Jew, his yearning for acceptance and welcome into American society. The first one is a baseball glove, and the second one is an apple tree. Apple pie, baseball. Okay? And you might say, oh, but Jews have been in baseball, right? Hank Greenberg and Sandy Koufax, but no. They were important precisely because the American Jewish community wanted to say, we're Americans too. Look, Sandy Koufax. Look, Hank Greenberg. Look, Bess Meyerson. Who knows about that? She was the, Miss America. That was a huge deal for the American.
He's lying. No one knows who he is, really. No one knows who he really is because he's not really this guy's friend.
Because, exactly. It's fake. That's right. The whole thing is fake. And you probably can tell, probably can guess, because all things end this way. In the second act, he gets revealed, right? Yeah. But, just like all plays, and by the end, or not all plays, but often, he has changed. The experience makes him different. And there is maybe a 5-minute scene at the end where he goes to this sort of apple grove that they've dedicated in memory of Connor, the Connor Project. They raised all this money through social media, and they dedicated this grove in his memory where Evan and Connor used to go and play, right? And it was all fake. And he happens to be there, and he sees Zoe, Connor's sister, and they sort of interact, and it's like 6 months or 9 months down the road. The best part about this last scene is Evan is different. He's a little more mature, he's a little more self-confident, and that's when you realize that Benkof was acting, right? You knew, but here you see how he could shade his acting in such a way that you believe it's 9 months later, and the story that affected him made him a different Evan Hansen. So, and he says at the end, "Dear Evan Hansen, didn't think he's going to be this." Okay, so I like this idea that it's a story about acceptance into the wider American society. I'm going to give you some Broadway shows. You tell me which one you want me to tell you was Jewish about. Hamilton, Wicked, Lion King, Cats, Anastasia, and Aladdin. Cats, okay. It's okay. Did you say that already? That was good. Cats, there's not a lot in there. First of all, T.S. Eliot, who wrote the lyrics, although he didn't know he was doing it when he did, vicious anti-Semite. But there's a line in there where they list all the different kinds of cats, and there's a line where they say, Sanical cats, rabbinical cats.
Oh.
So, Jews are in this show somewhere. Let's do one more. Hamilton, okay. Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is the best rhymer in the world, learned how to rhyme from Murray Horwitz, who was actually a friend of mine, who was, Murray's son was Lin-Manuel's roommate in college. And he was starting to write a little bit about writing shows and whatever. And Murray said, you really shouldn't, if you don't rhyme something, you have to have a really good reason. And also, you can make your rhymes better, so I bought you a rhyming dictionary. And that's how Lin-Manuel got his first start. The show has a number of biblical allusions, but it has a lot of other allusions. There's Shakespeare in there. There's a lot of rap allusions that I don't get. There's a lot of references to other musicals, and there's a lot of American history references that I do get. It's an extraordinary show. Oh my God. When you would ask me just a couple of years ago, what's your favorite show? I would say I can't. Hair, Evita, Les Mis, Cabaret. I couldn't answer. Now, what's your favorite show? Hamilton. I've seen it 5 times. It's amazing.
Wow.
It'll come to Israel. I think in 2030. It'll come to Concord. It'll open in 2035. So, thanks for coming. This was so much fun. Oh, I had a good time with you guys. Yeah. Thank you for coming.